I met Jake when he had been kicked out of high school for smuggling a brick of cocaine up from Mexico. And he had been in and out of trouble with the law since his early teens because he was sexually abused by multiple stepdads growing up. His grandfather was in the Mesa Police, was an executive, was an administrator, and a killer, a hard man. And his mom was attracted to hard, violent men, and he became a hard, violent man. And so the ironic part was that they were also very fluid, if not trans. And not that there's really a difference, but ultimately I was obsessed. I fell in love. I saw this person who had so much confidence, who was a grown man at 14 years old, who was helping raise 3 younger siblings. I have 2 younger siblings as well, and was doing the best they could to serve God and to be a good person. What I didn't know was that this missionary was also in love with Jake and decided that they were going to have this person to be a part of this Jake's life by any means necessary, and so began stalking and grooming him right around the same time that I met him. So he's in and out of my life, on and off drugs, in and out of programs, and this guy is just stalking him and showing up to these places and inserting himself into this father figure role for both of us. And I'm going to court cases with him at 18, 19 years old. I'm learning how the justice system works or doesn't work. I'm seeing all these like broken individuals just get railroaded by the system, while my friend, who's beautiful and white and was blessed with a capable public defender, is able to escape yet another series of charges, shoplifting charges related to his addiction. So I'm reading the Bible more and more often. At this point, I'm reading the New American Standard Version because supposedly it's the most textually accurate to the original documents. And as a lifelong reader and academic, that was important to me. And the fact that this missionary individual, whose name was Peter, seemed to emphasize that, just gave him more credibility in my book. And at the time, I'd already been exposed to the practice known as speaking in tongues, which is a form of, spontaneous self-expression that's kind of this ecstatic extension of spiritual experience. And people with my personality type, an absorptive personality, are especially prone to hypnotism and suggestion. What I didn't know is that especially in a group setting, well, I guess only in a group setting, but the practice itself causes the brain to fall into theta, which is essentially meaning that I was in a very suggestible state. And so over the course of about a year and a half, Peter started implanting or pulling these experiences from my past that involved me being martyred, and in my case, burned at the stake. So I was convinced that I was going to get brutally murdered at 25. Jake was going to get beaten to death by South American kids that he was on a mission to, and our third cult member was going to be beheaded. And that was in a private prayer session in the middle of this house. Nobody knew what was happening. There was other people that were kind of essentially accessories to the acts that maybe had some suspicions but couldn't prove them. I had family members mention how uncomfortable this person made them, but I'm one of those people where if I ride for you, I'm not going to let anybody throw dirt on your name. And so, especially at the time, this person was giving me love, so much physical attention I'd never received from my family growing up, that I was helpless. I was literally being seduced by this 40-something-year-old man as a way for him to get to my best friend and vice versa. And so he started playing the three of us off of each other. Jake, meanwhile, has fully graduated to intravenous heroin use, is on the streets. I don't know where he is. I'm heartbroken. I'm praying. I'm confused. I'm eating chorizo burritos like fucking like potato chips. I just have this bulky male body that I don't feel at home in, and this unachievable goal of masculinity that I have no idea what that even means. All I know is that God's given me a heart for people, for children especially, and that I want to do whatever I can to make sure that these kids have what they need. And all this time I'm being groomed by somebody that I found out later was an accessory to child sexual abuse, was addicted to child pornography and to violent, older, younger male scenarios, and was literally manifesting that, was creating that with me and my best friend. So when Jake resurfaced from the streets, his family gave him two options. It was either go to prison, go back, because he was already a felon at this point, or go with Peter. So Peter kidnapped him, and he took him to his compound in southern Indiana, where he did groundskeeping work for an unsuspecting ministry family and helped take care of the cattle and do all this man stuff and chop down trees. And so I'm like, fuck yeah, I've been working at Starbucks for 3 years. I feel like a kind of a abused person. Like, I am kind of an abused person, but like, I needed to break. I was in an unhealthy relationship with a coworker. I don't know. Lesbian relationship with a coworker. It was just messy, and so I let it go, and I chose to move to Indiana with my roommate at the time, who was the third cult member. And this whole time, we're like, my family's like, so what's going on with this guy? And it's like, okay, well, he's not asking me for money, he's showing me attention. And at this point, he gives me a $5,000 Taylor Grand Symphony, which I had taught myself how to play guitar. Music is also a big part of kind of this bonding enmeshment process. And of course, I don't know what enmeshment is in this particular juncture of in my life. So this person's just making me more and more emotionally reliant on their presence, on their affection. They're causing me to regulate on them so that they can use me. So we get to Indiana, and I love it. It's so open-ended. It's just in the middle of the woods. I get to learn how to use a chainsaw. I get to learn cattle ranching. I get to learn construction. I'm happy as a clam. We wake up. At this point, I'm reading the Bible 3 times a day. I've probably read the Bible cover to cover maybe 30 or 40 times. And That's just programming. I'm just being programmed. And this person is just influencing me. And I'm in this own kind of pocket reality at this point. I was on my 5th burner phone because this dude had us all on burners because he didn't believe that that God wanted us to sign contracts. And so nobody knows where I am. Nobody knows what's really happening. And then one day we wake up and Peter would travel fairly frequently. I don't know how many of these scenarios he had created throughout the country, but it was also deliberate to kind of make sure that there was plausible deniability. So he goes to Boston to visit his parents, and we are all kind of our own routines. We're going on long walks and praying and doing all this meditation and what have you. And it wasn't unusual for Jake and Peter to go off on their own because Jake was clearly the favorite. So when they get back, I noticed this mood change, this dramatic mood shift in Jake's kind of demeanor. And so we're at breakfast. I'm trying to figure it out. Okay, what's going on? All right, so we drop Peter off at the airport. I'll never forget. We were in my roommate's Chevy Tahoe, and we waved him goodbye, and he would kiss us on the forehead and call us his kids. Super creepy and super gross. And I look up at Jake and I go, so what's going on? And he goes, Peter took me aside when we were on the walk, and he looked at me and he said, I am the one. I am Jesus, essentially. And my whole life changed. I didn't know what to do. I could tell Jake was obviously very angry. Paul, my roommate, wanted to disbelieve it. And I was right in the middle. So we give it a day. We kind of let it sink in. We realize something's wrong. At this point, this guy's convinced us he's a prophet. He's Elijah reborn. And that we three are the most mature Christians in the world. And that God's about to use us all for some mysterious purpose that only he knows. And it took me probably 48 hours for me to realize that this dude wasn't Jesus. That angels weren't coming down from the heavens, that the world wasn't ending. I think it probably took Paul maybe a week or two. And it turns out Paul had been giving Peter, ironically, tens of thousands of dollars so that Peter could claim that he was receiving money from God and wash his hands from any kind of appearance of manipulation or wrongdoing. So we contact Peter contacts us. We have this hour-long conversation where we're like, this is fucked. Please don't come back. And then, he's freaking out. Next thing you know, we're all getting, 30 or 40 text messages. You can't do this. You're my sons. I love you so much. You can't do this. Like crazy ex-girlfriend texts. We're like, oh, fuck. Like, we joined a cult. Like, what is this? Like, what, who am I that I needed this so badly, And it was really embarrassing. So Jake had just turned 21, and I became an alcoholic like the next day. I started drinking to black out. I started drinking to make myself feel like less of a fucking dumbass, like less of a weakling. And we flew in a couple guns. because we didn't know if he was going to just come back. We stopped communicating with him, but we had no idea what this guy was capable of. So I slept with a loaded Remington 12 gauge, and I stayed up night after night praying to God that this dude wouldn't come back, but preparing myself in case he did. And I started dipping tobacco. I was terrified. And then the terror kind of just went away. The terror got buried in work. I was working, 8 to 12 hours a day and working with the EPA, sawing down dead trees, like breaking down shit, tractors. I was living a vibrant and free life with this like hella weird, very heartbreaking, very scary energy just right around the corner in my heart the whole time. So it was a very confusing time in my life where I felt I went from the happiest, the freest, and the most seen and loved I'd ever been to the most scared and the most confused I'd ever been in like 24 hours. And so eventually, after like a month or two, things started just falling apart. We were still trying to read our Bibles. Jake was in no hurry to go back to Arizona because he had just gotten sober. So he just kicked heroin. Now we're drinking again. And he knows if he goes back, shit's going down. But at the same time, I don't have my support structure. I don't have anything holding me there. So I'll tell you about the family with 8 kids in the goat farm later. They saved my life. goatmilksoap.com. But I got to go to a Godfather's Pizza with a missionary from Kenya. That was dope too. But yeah, other than that, I was kind of over it. So I moved back to Phoenix. I got back together with the girl I was in a toxic relationship with from work. And then because this dude's was basically trying to turn us into sex slaves, was very adamant about us staying virgins for the rest of our lives. So the first thing I wanted to do was fuck him right off. So I got drunk and lost my virginity to this girl, and I was so proud of myself. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't the stereotypical experience for her, so I was doing all these breathing exercises and stuff. I'm not even 21 at this point, and I've had a couple near-death experiences in the woods. I just don't know who I am anymore, and I get yelled at on my first time for taking too long, for not getting it over with. And so she's berating me for lying to her about it being my first time. This is great. My life is great. These people are great. So it doesn't work out. I do the classic Christian, I banged her, so I gotta marry her type thing, and put way too much pressure on this relationship. I'm a mess. Jake is back using drugs again. I'm living with his grandparents because I can't live with my parents because they don't want to know what happened. They can't physically wrap their minds around somebody wanting to do that to their kid and them not doing shit about it. So I start working in restaurants because I am experiencing these bouts of just pure rage. And I knew I needed to be around people or I would kill myself. So I was. And it saved my life. I went back to restaurants and I became a server at a corporate restaurant, and it was the structure and the discipline and the crazy people that I needed to make myself feel like there was a space for me in this universe. And I'll always be grateful for that team at Charleston's, because they saw me. You know, I didn't know I was trans at this point. I just knew that I was kind of fucked up, and that my benchmark for stressful situations had changed dramatically. So taking care of tables and running a section and taking shit from, you know, recovered meth addicts that have turned their lives around with front of house management, you know, like that was another day in the office for me. I thrived in those environments because I could completely dissociate from the person that I had become. So I took that horse and I rode it as far as I could. Now Jake shows back up in my life. I'm not even 21 yet, and we get an apartment together because he can't get an apartment because he has a felony. So he's on my phone playing. We're roommates. This is the only person in the world essentially that I feel knows what happened to me and what we went through, because it was creepy as hell. And honestly, like, we were so close, I felt like we shared like a telepathic connection. So like, there was so many things about that experience that I just didn't understand. So having him around, especially as a feminine presence, as somebody that could understand that I could be myself around, I would have done anything for this person. I was willing to kill for this person. I was willing to die for this person. So when he came home drunk one night and attacked me, it really broke my heart. There was so much anger built up from what had happened to him that all it took was the dumbest spark, and the person I love the most is headbutting me, screaming that he's going to kill me, and then trying to choke me unconscious. And I'd never been in a fight. I had no idea what, I mean, I defended myself, but I lost my best friend in the process. And before we could reconcile, he found himself facing another set of charges, at this time for assault with a deadly weapon and armed robbery. So he's in prison for 5 years. And I'm doing my best to cope. I'm drinking. I'm being a bro. I'm super into UFC because I'm obsessed with violence. I'm terrified that this cult leader is going to just show up and rape me, or that I'm gonna let him, because I'm so scared that I don't have a personality or an identity of my own outside of these people, that these are truly the only people that will ever see me, and that I'm obliged to sacrifice whatever I need to sacrifice. And that's horrible. Nobody should feel like that. Nobody should feel like that. But I felt like that for 15 years. I married another alcoholic. I became a bartender just so I could continue to drink and hide myself. Yeah, I was a really successful bartender. I love people. I'm very present with people, and especially because I felt like an empty shell of a person. So of course I'm looking to other people to just pour into me. Give me your problems, give me your bullshit. I'll be here for you, you know, in ways that people weren't there for me. But I had no idea how to be there for myself. I had no desire to be there for myself. I hated myself because this warped kind of male, overly toxically masculine aspect of my personality had just completely taken over, you know, and created this barrier of separation between me and me. And I couldn't talk about it. I had to get blackout drunk just to discuss it. I had no desire to go to therapy because I was raised by my mom's parents, who are both Christian marriage counselors, and especially my grandfather, he's a clinical narcissist. So I was raised in this very therapeutic, so to speak, environment. I knew all the language. I understood the basics of psychoanalysis. I knew that I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't want anybody near my head ever again. And so it took me absolutely becoming an addict in an active addiction. I went from 200 pounds to 205 all the way up to 265. I moved to New York. I was drinking probably 14 to 20 drinks a day, and I was just waiting to die. I got 2 DUIs. My second DUI was 0.36, which meant 36% of my blood was alcohol, and I knew that that was not the drugs I'd been. I was trying to die, but I didn't know how to pull the trigger. And I was so heartbroken at the thought of my family, especially my mom, finding my body, that I just wanted to do it away from everyone. I just wanted to crawl into a hole and fucking die. And I dragged somebody that I love very much through that process with me. Somebody that had also been abused as a child, who had been beaten by their father, who had been treated like shit, and who had treated themselves like shit because that's what she thought she was worth. So when we met, I saw myself so clearly, and I thought, I have to love this person. This person is so loving. This person is such a good person. She just can't see it. And I think subconsciously, I knew, or I wanted her to be able to heal and then see me. But obviously, as an adult, or as somebody on the other side of this relationship, I now see how impossible that was. She was giving me everything that she had. I was giving her everything that I had, to the point where I only knew how to manage. I had so many addictions. My addictions were managing my other addictions. So I'm drinking so much I can barely function. My hangovers are so intense. I'm smoking weed just to deal with the nausea, just so I have an appetite, so I eat enough to get through the day, because my job is to keep a smile on my face. My job is to put myself out there for people. So I'm doing my best to do all this. Like, this is my identity, is just give. And I worked at 44 restaurants and bars, like so many, because every time I would get close to someone, every time I would feel at home, I'd freak out, because I was afraid that they'd see through my bullshit. I thought that they would see my trauma, my transness, whatever, like, and I would just get bored too. Like, I'm ADHD as fuck, so like, I need stimulation. I'm very intelligent. I need to feel like I'm accomplishing something. So I kind of got addicted to opening restaurants. It's such a rush. It's this brand new kind of creative experience. So, I did the Hudson Yards open in New York, which is a $10 billion structure. I was at a 5-star restaurant with, next to Thomas Keller and David Chang. And like, I worked at the Edition Clock Tower in Manhattan. Like, I worked at dive bars where people are drinking at 11 a.m. and there's a baseball bat behind the bar in case Psycho Danny comes in, has too many shots of Fireball, and I have to kick his ass in front of the regulars again. It's like crazy shit. I ended up moving to LA with my ex, getting sober for 9 months. I jumped on keto. I lost 80 pounds. But that was, in its own way, a form of addiction. I was losing so much weight, I didn't have enough energy to process the trauma that had happened to me. And so when we left and moved to Orange County, started drinking again, it was even worse than before. I'm flying off electric bikes without helmets, concussing myself, taking rear view windows off cars, destroying the cartilage in my right knee, dislocating my shoulder, lying to my wife to her face consistently, just breaking every relationship that I had until 19 months ago when I was working at the the two hottest restaurants in LA at the time, and I got an umbilical hernia. My adrenal glands were shutting down. I had severe kidney infection. I had pancreatitis to the point where my pancreas was throbbing. I could feel my kidneys ache every day. Crazy looking urine. I just didn't know what else to do. So when I got the hernia, I came home, I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw my belly button poking out like a little turkey button. And I said, well, I guess this is it. After everything, this is what broke the camel's back, so to speak. And I took a 9-gram penis envy mushroom dose. I blacked out watching Attack on Titan. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's an anime. It's freaky as fuck. Don't watch it on mushrooms unless you're trying to do what I did. That's completely changed your life. But if you're into it, it's one way to do it. So when I came to, I was a new person. I was praying to a God that I didn't believe in, that they would either kill me or send me back different. And boy, did they deliver. Almost immediately I began writing. I just started writing pages and pages. Before it was too hard. I couldn't play music. It made me too sad. I had too much grief. And that's all this was just grief. Pages and pages of just pure creative expression. And after about a week, I started waking up with these nosebleeds, and it was weird because I would start bleeding. I'd meditate, I'd pray, and I'd let go, and I would just feel this drain in my sinuses, and I'd stop bleeding. And it happened for 3 days in a row, and on the third day, at the end of my meditation, it felt like this weight just come off me, and I felt this voice say two things. The first was, you are not your father. And the second was, if you want to know, know. You are not your father, and if you want to know, know. And for me, that meant I'm not my earthly father. I'm not my biological father who forced himself to stay in a job that he hated because he was scared to disappoint his family, to put himself out there, to experience life. It also meant my former spiritual father, the man who tried to groom me, condition me, sexually assault me. I wasn't either of those people, you know? And it was time for me to know who I was. It was time for me to stop lying to myself. And so I realized very quickly that I was not going to be able to stay sober and stay in the same house as my ex-wife, who was a dedicated alcoholic working for a liquor brand. All of our friends were bartenders. My whole community was based on alcoholism and hospitality, which sadly have almost become one and the same thing, you know? So I was in the middle of opening a $10 million restaurant in Beverly Hills for an absolutely incredible chef who absolutely changed my life. His name's Evan Funky. You can find him on Chef's Table Noodles on Netflix. Highly recommend. Inspiring person. First thing he says when we're at orientation, has anybody read the new Rick Rubin book? I'm like, oh my God, this guy's on the next level. And at the same time, I'm terrified because the last person I felt this way towards, the last older man I felt this way towards, you know, almost killed me. So it's a very interesting time. I'm sober. I'm opening my first restaurant sober. And There's Basquiat's and Warhols on the walls. There's every celebrity imaginable, royal families, you name it. And I'm grieving so hard that I have to that I have to come off the bar, once every 90 minutes to just weep in the corridor, because I'm barely hanging on. I'm doing everything I can to maintain my homeostasis. I moved out of my apartment just like a mile down the way, and we have two puppies that we raised together. So I could be an accessory, I could be a resource to her and walk the dogs and be around, but still maintain my sobriety. And I am smoking weed at this point. So, for me, sobriety is abstaining from the drug that caused me to dissociate. But ultimately, it was the best decision I ever made for my life, because I made it, and it was for me, and I needed it. And so that's where I'm going to end this video for now. We got the restaurant open. It's beautiful. It's some of the best pasta in the world. You should check it out if you're ever in Beverly Hills. It's worth it. But I would say probably go to Mother Wolf instead, or even better, Felix in Venice. A little bit more intimate. Anyways, I got so good at bartending that it became very obvious that if I wanted to pursue my dreams and be the person I was created to be, that I needed to recreate myself. So I left California last October and went back to Brooklyn to be with my baby sibling. And when I was there, we both came out to each other.